Welcome to Business Reporter's Best of British Business campaign. I'm Rachel Hicks. A tuning fork, the sound of precision, a solid point of reference for an ear, an instrument or an entire orchestra. A deceptively simple tool of perfection. Today we're talking to the founder of a British company that leads the market in tuning fork production. Aside from music, tuning forks are used in healthcare and industry, and so British quality is making a difference not just in concert halls, but also in hospital wards and motorways across the globe. Our guest today in the studio is Adrian Postuma, CEO of Uniplex. Adrian, hello and welcome.
Good morning.
Now, you've brought some tuning forks in with you that we'll have a look at it in a moment, but what's so special about them and what do they do?
Tuning forks can be used in a variety of different applications. They have the ability to resonate in frequencies that are used by healing therapists. Frequencies can be used in medicine, they can be used in music, and they can be used also in industry.
Okay, and we have a fabulous array here, this lovely selection that you've brought with you. Can you talk us through the selection and the differences between some of them?
Well, the most common that people will have probably seen is on their doctor's desk, because a tuning fork can be used to identify defects in the ear. This particular fork is always going to be available to a GP, and it can be used just to test whether a patient can hear that particular frequency directly through the ear canal or through the mastoid bones that connect. And defects can be registered in those that can't hear them. Okay,
so that's medical.
Industrial application, is probably the one that people probably feel worst about, because we calibrate the cameras that identify people who are speeding. This particular fork, makes a very high-pitched noise, but it can actually ensure that the camera is both accurate, or the radar gun is accurate, and is used by police forces throughout the world.
Right, so maybe they're not our friends, those ones.
Well, the ones that will be the friends are in music. They've been used for 150 years or more, actually, ever since John Shaw invented them. And the tuning fork calibrates usually the acoustic instrumentation. So the piano is the most important, because it is likely that everybody will tune off the piano, because it's the one thing that is constant. And so we ensure that the fork is made and guaranteed to resonate at the frequency required at 20 degrees centigrade, but that's a technical part. This is A440.
Okay, yeah,
picking
can
up
hear
from
that,
nicely.
yes.
This particular fork is to present to an orchestra leader who's departing, perhaps. The actual one that's most commonplace is a blue fork, same frequency. The array of forks that are available can be made to any frequency anybody requires. So as A440 was the industry standard, created from the mid-1930s, there are a number of people who believe that A432 was the better frequency to use. And Dire Straits, for instance, are great exponents of having their albums remastered to an A432 frequency. You then have the forks which are in use by people in homeopathy or healing therapy, and they use forks for a variety of applications. The fork set I brought along today will balance the chakras in the body, but the chakras actually identify a number of frequencies that are used and commonplace around the world. Indian temples use the 174 Hertz frequency for all their instrumentation.
And what's that one?
This particular one is 417, because this is of interest to the Buddhists, because this is the one they will hum to or chant to. And curiously, of course, this is an interpolation of 174, as is 741, which is also used as part of the chakra balancing set.
So if we look at the global market of tuning forks, what is Uniplex's position within that?
The position of Uniplex is as of the premier manufacturer. Our products are recognised as being the best because of the method of manufacture that we utilise. We believe that the marketplace going forward will actually be improving all the time as we open more countries up and more people get involved in healing therapies, which is the biggest developed area that we're finding. We satisfy the marketplaces in unusual places such as India and Pakistan, who are cheap manufacturing sources, but they can't actually make what we do. China's the same. We sell through Hong Kong. Then you've got Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, USA, all of which are English-speaking countries, which I recognise. But also we're developing our international market to include many other nations as we open new markets up all the time.
And it looks a very simple object, but I'm assuming there's a lot of technology and precision which goes into creating it.
There is precision. I mean, we start off, we use CNC machines to create the bases. The actual forks themselves are tuned throughout the process. They are incredibly accurate, always at 20 degrees centigrade, because that's the reference that we use. And they're made of metal after all, so they will swell marginally in the heat or contract in cold climate. But because of the way that we manufacture, they are accepted as being the best.
So are all tuning forks created equal?
Well, this is the very point. No, not at all. Many tuning forks you see on the marketplace can actually be made out of a piece of bent wire with a stem just welded to it. That doesn't it might create the sound, but it doesn't create it for very long. We manufacture all our tuning forks out of a single piece of aluminium or a single piece of steel, both of which are made to prescriptions that we define, both of which we have to buy by tons, because that's the way we can get the mills to actually make them. And then when we machine out of single pieces, we actually ensure the accuracy all the way through.
So yours resonate for longer than anybody else's?
Well, that's precisely it. The sustain of a tuning fork that we make will be a reference point for a much longer period of time than any of our competitors. But the problem is you have to buy them or compare them side by side to know that. Unfortunately, people buy by sight and by price sometimes.
I understand that Uniplex is not just about tuning forks. What's other business, or what's the rest of your business that you're involved in?
I was actually the founder of Uniplex, not the founder of VAG Tuning Forks, a company we bought in 2012. But Uniplex manufactures surgical instruments, and tuning forks are made in exactly the same sort of way. It wasn't a stretch, so to speak, to bring them into our portfolio. But what we did is we applied our surgical instrument making skills and talents to the manufacture of tuning forks to create what is the world leader in by definition. Not necessarily by volume, but certainly by the actual clarity of sound they produce and the sustain they produce on.
So what's the future for Uniplex? What's new on the horizon?
Well, it's actually quite difficult to develop tuning forks any different than we have already got, because in so many ways the frequencies themselves are defined by their number. However, we're one of the very few, if not the only tuning fork maker who's prepared to manufacture bespoke forks, i.e. to a frequency that any customer wants to have. We've been asked to do things which are really quite remarkable to help balance people's lives and their immediate environments. We were actually asked once to produce tuning forks to help balance the trees in this particular forest. We had to do some research into that, but there are areas around the frequency of life that we mentioned earlier, the 174 Hertz, which actually do resonate with items such as flowers and trees, plants, and make their lives better, and therefore make our lives better.
What a lovely thought. Adrian Postuma from Uniplex, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. You're welcome.